And welcome in to another episode of the Snap, Tackle, and Flop college football podcast, where we cover everything from the SEC to the Pac 12. I'm in the booth today with both my buddies, sports writer Tyler Waldrop
Hey, happy to be here.
and statistical analyst Leo King.
Statistical analyst. That's new.
That's a that's a good promotion for Leo from just
Thank
the
God.
guy that records the podcast.
All right, y'all, let's get into it.
So I guess this is as good as place to start with any. We've been kicking around the idea: does the SEC have any good quarterbacks in the league? And last episode, we kind of trashed the league's non-conference schedule. So I figured today we would trash the league starting quarterbacks. Keshawn, are you all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. For those of you who don't have video, because this is an audio podcast, Keyshawn just appeared to swat at some sort of bug
Hey man,
multiple
it's some
times.
trash.
Did you
This
get it?
season's trash, man. How
Oh, okay.
it's trash. Get
You're
that out of my
expressing your
house.
disgust.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all ranked the SEC quarterbacks before the show got started, 1 through 5, and everyone received at least 2 votes except for one guy. Leo decided to give his fifth place vote to Bryce Young. So, Leo, are you endorsing Bryce Young as Alabama's starting quarterback with this vote?
I'm absolutely not. I put Mac Jones number one. However, I think the quarterback play this year is pretty damn bad. I mean, I do think Bryce Young would have had a chance to push. I don't think he would have won out because Saban has never been much for playing true freshmen until the last couple of years due to very bad circumstances at the quarterback position. So I was positive all along that Mac Jones is going to be the one who gets the start and most likely finishes out the season, unless Bryce Young is some like legend,
Mm-hmm.
which hopefully he is for my sake. But yeah, I don't think he has any chance of really pushing for that now, just due to the coronavirus situation and the delay of practices so long. I mean, he's not going to have many reps at all with the team.
Do you think Saban will play both guys? Some people have kind of floated the idea that maybe Saban wants to avoid falling into that. The really highly ranked freshman comes in and then transfers because he never plays. Do you think that Saban will play both guys to avoid that?
I don't think that's something Saban ever is afraid of. That's not his. That's not the way he operates his team ever. He's never the type to let a single player dictate how he runs his team.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think Bryce Young is going to see the field a decent bit, but I don't
Oh
think
yeah,
it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a significant enough role where you can argue he's, you know, an actual anything more than a number two quarterback, if that makes sense.
yeah, like the typical mop up duty. Maybe some early mop up duty. Maybe we're only up 24 points or so in a game, and we put him in rather than 35.
Keyshawn, you want to say anything about Bryce Young, or should I just keep going with the list?
Let me say it this way. I want to say this about Bryce Young just from the perspective of the tape and the film that I've seen of him. I will say he's going to be a dynamic quarterback. I don't think he's got the makings to get on the field starting the season. Now, again, if we have an injury situation like last year, just say like Mac Jones gets hurt or Mac Jones gets hurt out the gate or something like that, then I think you might have a case for him to be on the field. The only problem is with that is I just don't think he's developed enough, and as a player, and again, he's just a freshman, but I don't think he's going to be able to develop enough between time to really get on the field and just say that he's the guy. So I think Bryce has got a lot of learning to do this season. I know with the coronavirus, this is going to kind of put a kind of a setback on the quarter
Damn.
SEC or for Alabama this year, but time will tell.
Yeah, for the record, I will say, just based and anything can happen. Guys don't always translate the way we expect them to when they make a jump from high school to college or college to NFL. The game does change significantly. But if Bryce Young was, going to start for Alabama or does end up starting and playing most of the games this season, I think Leo's spot is a fair place to put Bryce Young. I think he could. I think if he was given the time on the field, he could definitely work himself into top 5 quarterback in the SEC. And I fully think that says everything about the group of quarterbacks that we have coming back.
And it may be a surprise, as it often is. Just a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of quarterbacks coming that no one knows about yet.
I mean, Paul Tyson stepped on the foot. Well, maybe one time last season during mop-up duty, but I mean, Paul Tyson has been around in the system for at least a year. So I will give Paul Tyson a little bit more edge over Bryce Young. Now, I will say this about Bryce Young. Bryce Young is a mobile quarterback. He's very mobile. And if he can get in that scheme and really kind of, shake it up a little bit, he's got a little bit of talent. But I just don't, I mean, we've seen players in the past, that just were not nowhere where they need to be when they came from high school to college. I mean, I can't. There's a few people that come to mind, but at the same time, I mean, if you look at a player like Derrick Henry, high school at Yulee down there in Florida,
Don't remind me.
Tore it up. Then came to college, tore it up again. Now he's in the NFL, tearing it up. I mean,
Don't
the
remind
key
me.
on what I'm trying. Do what?
So
In the high school and the professional levels, he's ruined my team's life.
But the key is, I mean, Derrick Henry has, if you look at Derrick Henry, he's translated on all 3 levels. I mean, some players can do that, but you could look at, just many players that come in as a 4-star, 5-star, they don't translate. So, I mean, like you said, it's just we gonna see. That's all we can do at this point.
That's a bold take from Keshawn, who's fading Bryce Young. It's going to be rough when he takes over for Alabama this year.
It will be. You're going to have to explain.
Moving on, we won't be able to get him on the podcast with Keshawn's hate, that's for sure. Bryce Young is definitely going to pass on us. So the next guy on the list, number 5 on our list, Jamie Newman. We all had him as 4th or 5th. When we ranked him coming into the SEC. Didn't even play in the conference last year. Played in the ACC, which probably for all of us is pretty close in a pretty close race with the Pac-12 for which conference should just get kicked out of the Power 5 group. So what is that? Do we think Jamie Newman's good, or is the SEC group really this bad that we think the Wake Forest guy is going to be the 4th or 5th best guy?
Let me say this out the gate. Jamie Newman better get ready to play some hard nosed football coming up this year. I don't think playing in the ACC, it's a totally different ball game. He comes to the SEC. I think he's gonna have success at Georgia, but I say that because of the players around him and the scheme that Coach Kirby likes to run around that team. He's not. I won't say he's necessarily a bad quarterback, but he's got a good amount of potential to really change up the game. And he's dynamic. I watched a little bit of his highlights from last year at Wake Forest. He's got a type of dynamic to him that he can play and really change up the game in just some different ways. But as for him being good, he's got the most potential. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of both. I think he was solid last year, but then again, you go to the Clemson game, which could be a factor of him not having a running game, not having a good team around him. I'm sure it is. They only put up 3 points that game, and he only put up 41 yards, and he's going to be facing a couple defenses, 2 or 3 defenses, similar, not the same caliber, but similar to Clemson's defense when he comes to the SEC versus just one when he's in the ACC. But I do think a lot of it is just comparing to the other quarterbacks. much shining in the SEC right now.
So let me give you some stats for that can kind of explain that. So that Clemson game happened in November, and what y'all don't know, and what I know because I had to cover the ACC last year when I was covering Florida State, is Wake Forest started off hot and faded fast because they just lost guys week after week down the stretch. They lost their top two receivers. He didn't have his top two options in November and December when he played Clemson. In September and October, he had a 66 completion percentage. That's 14 points higher than he finished the year off. He had 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in that stretch, and he only took 5 sacks. So, when you look, he took 14 sacks without those guys throwing 2, only 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and then his yards per attempt suffered. So, I do think that Newman does have a greater ceiling than what a lot of people are recognizing. And I think it's because when you go back and watch some of those big games that Wake Forest played in down the stretch, Wake Forest finally got some buzz. They started off strong. So people, might have watched them, especially, people that are going to watch the SEC games. Maybe they would have turned them on for a game like that Clemson game. And you just see Wake Forest get killed. And I think that's a part of it. That being said, I still don't really see it with him. I'm not confident that he's, this amazing guy that's going to suddenly take Georgia to this new level. I think there's a chance he's an upgrade, though. What do y'all think? Do y'all think he's an upgrade or more of the same?
I think they could use a more dynamic quarterback than what they had. I think to compete with the way the SEC's going, you have what Alabama's had with the dynamic RPO option or the RPO scheme that we had with Tua. Jesus, words are hard right now. You go to LSU with Joe Burrow and that spread offense they ran, and then you look at Georgia just doing the same old pro style stuff that we did in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Moving it to a spread style offense or kind of innovating some stuff could maybe help them take the leap because their offense was dismal at best.
Well, I ask yourself this question. If Newman isn't the guy, who is? Georgia, they don't have much depth at the quarterback position. I don't see really anywhere, unless they have a guy that we're not even looking at right now. I don't know who can really come in and fill his shoes. So to me, I feel like, yeah, he's got the greatest ceiling, but at the same time, and sure, Wake Forest might have started off hot last year. I'll give him that, but he's got to be able to make plays. He's got to be able to go out there and compete. And playing in a conference like the ACC, and not the bag on the ACC, but it's just not competitive. If Clemson's going to be at the top every year, all your other teams around, all the other teams in the conference really don't play you at a high level of intensity. In the SEC, outside of probably 2 or 3 teams, you're playing every week. It's like championship ball. You think about he gets in a game like Florida. He has to play a game against maybe South Carolina or something like that, where he's got to actually keep the team afloat, or Georgia doesn't make it to the SEC championship. So he's gonna have to be the guy, and if he's not the guy, who's gonna step in and fill his shoes?
There's no question he's the guy for Georgia, though. The question is, if you look at what he did well in September and October, when he had a healthy roster around him at Wake Forest, and when you look up his highlights, y'all both talked about him, that he has looked dynamic. He can obviously move. He's not this stationary statue that you have to run this pro style, whatever that really means. But basically, just you don't have to have somebody just sit in the pocket and pick apart defenses. He can make plays out of nothing. If he can do all of that with his new team, then that does make Georgia's offense scary. But I think the thing that we're all sort of picking up on is, he's going to play a lot tougher defenses and he has to learn a new team, and he hasn't even met these guys, or if he has, he hasn't spent much time with them and hasn't practiced with them because of the, COVID shutdown. So it's a lot to ask of a guy going through the off season we're going through right now. So I think we have him ranked pretty appropriately as our sort of fifth option. Um, to sort of move on and keep it moving, we had Kellen Mond for Texas A&M fourth. I was the highest on him. I had him third. Y'all both doubt him a little more. Leo, I'm gonna guess based on knowing you and the where you had him that you're kind of sick of seeing Kellen Mond. You feel like you've seen everything that he has to offer.
Yeah, you kind of read my mind, because I remember pretty much this exact same discussion last year with Kellen Mond, him being kind of average last year or the year before, and people thinking, oh, Kellen Mond's going to be one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the SEC, and then we came out and saw not do anything. I would say he's got the most potential of any of these guys, not including Mac Jones, because having been in the system for 3 years, well, maybe not that system, having been around for so long, he's started for at least a year and a half. Did he start his full 2 years?
I believe so.
It feels like he's been around for a long ass time. So I mean, he's experienced. I'll give him that. He's probably one of the most veteran, except for Mac Jones, who's been able to ride the bench, and Kyle Trask, sorry, who has also rode the bench.
So Mond's numbers, if you look at just his passing numbers, I don't have his rushing numbers in front of me. He basically did the same thing, almost like very close to like exact yardage, touchdowns, everything. Completion percentage, everything's pretty close from 2018 starting for A&M to 2019. But I don't know. The reason I bumped him up to third is he did have to play Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and LSU last year.
They did have probably one of the top 3 hardest schedules.
I mean, maybe he grew some as a passer and we didn't notice it because he just had this murder's row schedule.
Well, he may have been injured half the year. Like, not truly injured, but he may have just been in pain. Like, he probably had bruises everywhere.
No, I'd say his spirit had been injured, have to play that lineup. But, I mean, here's my take on that. Kellen Mond, year after year, we always say, "Oh, Texas A&M is going to be this monster team that comes out of the West. They're a dark horse of the West." Okay, well, Jimbo's been there 3 years now, going on this coming up this third season. Kellen Mond, I still don't feel like I still do not feel like in good faith, that he is going to really be able to get it done. I mean, to me, Kellen Mond's got a lot of talent. He could be a great quarterback, but I think this is more going to lie on Texas A&M and the receivers that he has, and can they help him in tight spots? I mean, look at the Clemson game last year. They only scored 10 points. Kept it close, but they only scored 10 points in that game. Alabama game, yeah, competitive for a quarter. Bama took off. I feel like Kellen Mond's got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of good dynamics about him to where he can make plays when they're needed. But the problem is, I don't think at Texas A&M he's going to be able to do his full potential. So, I mean, he's got a lot of upside, but to me, it's the same old Kellen Mond that we've seen year in and year out.
One thing I'll argue with you right here: first 6 games for A&M next year, FCS game, North Texas, Colorado, which is at home, at Arkansas, or the Arkansas neutral site game. That's the first 6. Then A&M is going to hit the road to play Miss State. Then A&M's going to host Fresno State. So, if any team has a chance to kind of ease into the schedule next year, it's A&M.
Let's just say after week 6, if his stats are bad, then he's not one of the top.
Yeah, if he's not throwing if he's not statistically the second best quarterback 6 weeks in, then Kellen Mond shouldn't even be in our list right now, because he's gonna have to end with after he's gonna have to end with Auburn, South Carolina, and then Alabama and LSU in back-to-back weeks in November. So, Auburn, South Carolina, that's in October, but still, like, the schedule gets significantly harder after the first 6 weeks for them. Okay, so to keep it moving, I can kind of sit out here because y'all are all over the place with Bo Nix. We have Leo, who ranked a backup ahead of him and didn't even put Bo Nix in his top 5 for Auburn. Then we have Keshawn, who's ready to buy the jersey and has him ranked number 1. Keshawn, you ordering the jersey right now?
Let me put it this way: you know as well as I do, and to not be biased, I will not be buying a Bo Nix jersey. I promise you. I promise you that. But I will say this: um, Bo Nix to me last year. I watched this kid grow up. I really did from the Oregon game. I saw that kid just really come out there and win a game and kind of win a team over kind of in that Oregon game, even though he didn't have the greatest game of his life. I mean, Bo made a bunch of freshman mistakes last year. Let's just be honest about that. Made a ton of mistakes last year, but the thing about him is he learned from his mistakes. Now, getting late into the season, I will say Bo really played some good ball. He had a gosh, I know when he was playing about that team for when he was playing the Georgia game right there. Yeah, they lost, but it's okay. He made a great run at that game. He stayed in the game, and even though Auburn did lose that game, he still did what he had to do. Now, the Alabama game. Not saying that that was much more Bo winning that game than just Auburn having some calls their way, but Bo Nix came out there and he was a trooper. So this coming up year, I think Bo Nix, if he can stay out there, learn this, he's learned if he can have learned the scheme in the Gus Malzahn scheme, and here in the off season, kind of gotten a little bit better, gotten a little bit more. Yeah, I'll say he has a little bit more, control of the locker room for his side. He's just to me number 1 right now.
I mean, I guess I'm okay with him being in the top 5. I don't. I just. I never saw anything of him that impressed me at all last year. I just saw obviously the picks, but more than that, I just saw pretty average to below average play. I never saw anything good except for Auburn's defense. I was actually impressed by how many games they lost with how good their defense was. Pretty much put most of that on Bo Nix. And I mean, it's understandable from a freshman, so he could definitely take a big jump this year. Because you never really expect a true freshman quarterback to be great.
But did you see that throw against Oregon? The throw at the very end?
Oh my God. And what about all the throws that led to them still being in that situation? There was a lot of ugly play, and there was not very much impressive play, in my opinion. And something that you would think would shine more with how good that damn defense was. That was probably the best, definitely the best defense.
But can you say Auburn's defense kept them in the game as much as Bo Nix had to make plays when they needed to be made?
The defense was definitely way better than the offense. The
By a
defense
long
carried
shot.
Bo Nix as far as they could.
I will say yes. I mean, don't get me wrong. Auburn's defense last year, great, but one of the best defenses in the country. But what I'm saying is, if you don't have Bo Nix, is your defense still in a position to
Well, I mean, it just depends. If they have another average quarterback, then yeah, they're the same position.
So I would argue that Bo Nix 57.6 completion percentage would say yes. I think the average quarterback in the SEC can complete slightly more than half of their throws. So
and I'm not saying he can't, because apparently coming in there was all this hype around him. I'm not surprised he wasn't good as a freshman. Very few quarterbacks are good as a true freshman. So I don't want to say it's impossible for him to be good, but nothing at all that he showed me last year impressed me.
Fair enough.
So I will say this because I did rank Nix second on this list. SEC Freshman of the Year, yeah, that's something, and I think he did deserve it. he was okay. Good for a freshman. We'll see if he improves. But he did, to Keshawn's point, he did end the year with 173 consecutive pass attempts without an interception. So he got his picks in early. So, whether that's growth or not, it's hard to say. But didn't throw one against. He played Alabama and Georgia late in the year. Didn't throw a pick in that game. I think that's significant.
Yeah.
I don't know how significant that is.
Better than the first
guy
half.
the guy we had second might as well have been a true freshman, and Kyle Trask. And I didn't see this one coming out of, I didn't see this one coming at all. So y'all were both, I think, a good bit higher on Trask than I was. I still ranked him fifth. Keshawn, I think you had him second, and Leo, you had him second as well?
Second.
Somewhere up there. Yeah. So what are y'all seeing in Trask that I'm not seeing? Why do y'all think he's going to be number 2?
For me, it's really just statistics. I mean, I didn't watch a whole lot of him. It bored me. He had 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 3,000 yards, and limited snaps. He didn't even play the whole season. He kind of little bit not. He was pretty early, but I mean, overall, he had good stats. Not a lot to hate about him. I mean, he's pretty raw, and he did that well. I can only imagine him doing this year.
For me,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Leo.
I was just gonna make fun of his last name and call him Kyle Trash because it's fun. It's not important.
Oh my gosh. Well, I gotta say this about Kyle Trask. He did something I don't think given, well, I guess outside Alabama, he did something last year that was really kind of unprecedented, which, come in and really just take control. He took control of that team early in the season after Felipe went down, and he won the locker room over. He went ahead and just made plays. And that's why he's number 2 in my spot, just because with the team that Florida has now, don't get me wrong, Florida is at best a mediocre team, but I think if you put Kyle Trask in there, he's kind of the benefactor. I mean, there were some times I watched some Florida games last year. I think the Vanderbilt game came to mind. What in the world? How did Florida win that game after Vanderbilt was kind of hanging in there with them? As hard as that is to say, but the way that Kyle Trask really commanded the game, he's a game manager, and I think that's what Florida has missed. And a lot of the quarterbacks that they've had in recent years past. So I feel like if he's able to be a game manager, run, really kind of keep Florida in the game, especially some late games. The Georgia game is one that I'm circling this year, which is always a game that you circle. But that Georgia game, if he can come in there and really control the field and really make some plays early, I mean, you got to think about it. It's Kyle Trask is just he's just good. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's a good QB. He's the guy I want. I'll put it this way: in the fourth quarter, he's the guy I want to make sure I have the rock and he has the rock in his hand.
Hey everybody, we at Snap, Tackle, and Flop really appreciate y'all listening to us, and we appreciate our sponsors. We just want to take a moment to shout out the Ownville King Brewing Company, and lately they have the Regal Hazy New England IPA. It has hints of orange, very strong hoppy aroma, very little bitterness. All in all, a beer that even I would drink, and I'm not a big beer guy, right, Leo?
Yeah, I think you'd like it.
So, would Keshawn drink this beer?
I don't drink beer, but I would definitely try it.
Okay, well, we just lost that sponsor, so.
Yeah.
I
need to not advertise on a show with people who don't drink beer.
No, it's gonna be good for you. It'll pay off. It'll pay off for the Ownville King Brewing Company.
Of course.
To get back to our list, we were discussing our number 1 option. The Alabama's own Mac Jones, who we haven't gotten to yet. So I had him number 1. You had him number 1, Leo. And Keshawn hated on Mac Jones and had him all the way down at 3. So before we talk about why we had him, he's gone. Okay,
We lost a
Keshawn,
presenter.
if you're done walking away mid-podcast, do you want to tell the viewers why you hate Mac Jones?
I don't hate Mac Jones. Let me be clear on that. Let me say this: I just don't believe in him enough. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to hear. I know that's going to be hard for a lot of people to understand my reasoning behind this. But Mac Jones, to me, last year he had a great season. He um, towards the end down the stretch. And I mean, he proved himself as a quarterback, but is he a leader? That's my key. That's the key thing that I'm looking at right now. And I don't know without a shadow of a doubt if Mac Jones is going to be a leader in the locker room and as well as going to be a leader on the field. Sure, he's got a lot of moxie. He's got a lot of fight in him. He's got a lot of grit. He can get you a touchdown if you need it, but in a situation, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to step up in a leadership role and really make Alabama and the players believe, Alabama fans and the players believe if he's really going to be the guy. So that's why I have him at 3. He's got a lot of room for upside, but I mean, I just don't have right now, as it sits on May 22nd, I just don't have a lot of faith in him being a leader at quarterback. So that's my take.
Leo, care to rebut to the hater?
I mean, I coming off of Jalen Hurts and then Tua Tagovailoa, I can understand the concern about leadership with someone who's not going to live up to that. But I don't think it's really a problem that he doesn't live up to that precedent, because those were some of the best leaders we've seen in college football in quite some time. I don't know if that's where you got that from, but I mean, I haven't seen any indication that he's not going to be a good leader. He was able to come in and keep this team together somewhat after we lost our phenomenal Hawaiian QB.
So, hold on, Keshawn. Here's the stats I just want to throw out before we get any further. If you just look at what Jones did in his 4 starts, and you say he's going to play 13 games, then he finishes with 3,600 passing yards, 43 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. If you look at what Tua did in 2018, he had just under 4,000 passing yards, 43 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's pretty close to a guy that I think we would all agree is one of, if not the most phenomenal college quarterback of the last 2-3 decades.
I will say this. I think with the coaching situation, I think he's going to be able to make good decisions as far as, Steve Sarkisian did better than I thought last year. Really kind of having the offense under, good play calling. But again, you look at quarterbacks from years past. I'll just go fire off some. AJ McCarron, automatic game manager. Blake Sims, he won the team over, showed them that he could be a leader. Then you got Jake Coker. Jake Coker won him over as well. Then we got Tua and Jalen in the last 4 years. So I mean, does Mac Jones? Yeah, he can get it done on the field, but does he present that same leadership that those guys that before him does? That's just my biggest concern, and I just don't see it right now. I
What do
just
you
don't see it.
what do you have to base that off of?
The number one thing I have to base it off of is this. I mean, it can't. You get when you see him go out there. When you see him go out there, you see a guy that's like, okay, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm kind of got a lot of pressure on my back because if I get hurt, who's gonna follow my shoes right now?
Why don't you
Yeah,
watch the guy in front of you break his hip and then suddenly have to play and,
that's my
and
point.
win football games for the team with more pressure on it than any other team in the country, and see if you don't appear nervous at times on TV.
I mean, I think it's an unknown. Keyshawn has some uh, legitimacy to this. It's an unknown. We haven't seen him lead for a whole season. But we did see him get thrown into the fire late in the season, and he performed pretty well considering. I don't think there's a concern.
I mean, let's look at the games that I know he came through, and we'll just start with Tennessee at least. Tennessee, it was a rocky road that game, but Bama took off. Uh, then you got he came in the Mid-State game, after Tua had a season-ending injury, handled his business. Then the Auburn game, okay, he made a couple mistakes. I'll give him that, but he kept poised. So he kept himself composed, and he knew he had to start that game. Then he had the Michigan game, and the Michigan game he kind of was lackluster the first quarter, but then he got it going, and they pulled off the dub. So I mean, again, these are just the concerns I have.
I thought for me the Michigan game was kind of eye opening to what Mac Jones could grow into. Given the reps and given the time to prepare. I felt like the performance in the postseason kind of showed me that is the reason that I had Mac Jones number one. I don't know. Did you feel the same way, Leo, watching him in that bowl game?
Yeah, mostly. Also, the Iron Bowl gave me a lot of confidence in him because that was a much more challenging environment for him. And I don't really put the fault on him for much of anything for that game. I put it more on our defense giving up that many points to that horrible offense.
Yeah, I think when you look back at the Iron Bowl, I think a lot of people, I know Auburn people, they think of the picks right away.
Yeah.
They'll remind you, and Alabama fans too. Are quick to remind you if you talk to them about Mac Jones. Most will bring up the two picks, and I think that's a fair criticism. You can look at different things that happened in those moments, and you can say in both. I think in both circumstances, I think you can say great play by Auburn. I think you can say the rest of the guys on Alabama, maybe could have helped Mac a little more, but you do got to put some fault on that with Mac. You
Yeah.
know, it,
But everyone makes those mistakes. I mean, even
yeah.
Tua makes mistakes like that. It's not a pattern yet. I mean, there's no indication that that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, that was what I took away from the Michigan game. He had, a, a mixed bag in the Auburn game, some really great moments, and then, those two interceptions that just kind of killed Alabama. Um, Not to mention everything that happened on the other side of the ball. But then, he none of that really showed up in the Michigan game. I felt like Jones, looked like exactly what Alabama wanted him to look like. And I also think he doesn't have to be Tua or maybe not even Jalen Hurts to be the best quarterback in the SEC next year. I mean,
No.
the list we just went through, I think, kind of proves it. Like, I totally agree. Keshawn has merit to say, there's a lot of unknowns with Mac Jones, but there's unknowns with just about everybody on the list.
Except Kellen
And
Mond. We know he's going to be
yes,
a solid 3 or 4 in the SEC.
except Kellen Mond is the exception, and I think we have him appropriately rated on our list. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a weak year for quarterback. I think one or two of these guys are going to pop and surprise us and make the doubts and the criticism that we have now look kind of foolish. But overall, I think a year from now when we look back, we're going to go, that was not the greatest year.
Mm.
That we might not even know who the third best quarterback in the SEC is a year. When we look back next year, we might just be like, this guy emerged and this guy, and then it's just, ugh.
Well, it's going to be a rebuilding year, I think, on a lot of fronts for the SEC. Quarterback is a big position. Um, Defense actually is going to be another thing for a lot of teams. I know a lot of teams are going to have a lot of defensive change ups and a lot of new guys coming through. Uh, it's just going to be a different year for the SEC. I think a lot of the teams like Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State got new administration. Well, Tennessee doesn't, but they've got definitely a lot of potential on this, both sides of the ball to be great. And whatever happens, whatever happens is gonna, we're gonna see a lot of shakeup. I think September is not gonna be indicative of the season. As we get late into the season, I think we're gonna really see some different style. We're gonna see a lot of different things come through as far as like offensive strategy a lot of defensive strategy depending on where the quarterbacks and where the defenses are.
Hey, guys, speaking of the SEC season, you want to hear some good news?
Yeah.
The presidents met today. Like Keshawn said, we're recording on Friday, May 22nd. The SEC presidents met today, and they voted that they're going to let football players start coming back to campus beginning June 8th to begin voluntary workouts. Which for those who don't know, even though the coaches can't work with these guys, the football players as a team get together and run 7-on-7 drills, and they run and they lift and everything, and every offseason, and they haven't been able to do that with the pandemic, but that's starting up again. June 8th.
We get to bring quarterbacks and receivers together. It'll be beautiful.
I think this is the start of I think this is the start of the downside of this whole pandemic thing, man. This is beautiful. So thankful that they made the right decision today.
Yeah, it's I mean, things are starting to trend, not just in the SEC, but nationally, at least. I know we still probably have doubts about California and maybe some of the Pac-12 schools, but things are starting to trend in the right direction for an on-time, not normal, but at the very least, something close football season.
Hope so.
Yeah, I mean, sports have been gone since at least March. We'll say March 13th or somewhere around there.
Pretty close, yeah.
So I mean, just the thought of being able to have a football season, especially for the college athletes, I know that's been heavy on a lot of college athletes' minds, especially the baseball and the basketball players this past year who were not able to participate in their national championship or their seasons in the basketball tournament. So I mean, this is just going to bring a lot of morale back to student athletes and then also professionals that are getting ready to take the field as well in their respective seasons.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean it's good that we actually have some good news. It'll be good that workouts happen. I for one hope that not right away. That this is going to be it sounds like at least at Alabama it's going to be a phased process. So they haven't released details. Louisville did release details on Thursday, and they kind of sounds like 30 football players are going to show up on the first day, and then I think they're going to wait 2 weeks and then bring another 30, and then they're going to wait another 2 weeks, and they'll have everybody there. So about 30 days so you're looking at the beginning of July, you have all your football players on campus. It's interesting. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, that's what's interesting to me. I'm wondering if they do the first 30 as in the starters, basically that sort of idea, or if they're going more towards let's get the freshmen who aren't as experienced, let's get them in here earlier and have them start learning. I don't know how they're going to organize that.
You would think, I mean, it would absolutely be more beneficial to give the freshmen the most time possible. But when you think about it, to a certain extent, strength coaches are able to kind of coach guys through workouts, and maybe that's what schools will prioritize is, let's get those guys in the weight room where we can monitor them and get them up to speed. But, when it comes to these guys working out with each other and doing, that stuff's supervised, but, coaches aren't allowed to direct any of that, the sort of unofficial practice. That's got to be left up to the upperclassmen. So that makes me think maybe you're bringing back, your seniors and some key juniors, because if you bring the freshmen, they can't lead themselves through those sort of workout routines because they haven't been there. They don't know them.
Yeah.
Like they don't know each other.
And it could be very different from school to school. It may be more just Saban and all the guys sat down and said, who do we need to bring in first? And they're in depth enough. I'm sure they've strategized. It may not just be like a broad group of just freshmen or just starters. It may be hand selected guys that need to be here earlier, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and we also don't know what phased, Louisville outlined it
Yeah.
for us, and that gives us an idea. But for all we know, I know that some people who work from home, they have questionnaires. Do you have someone in your immediate family who you believe is, like has an immune condition or some other underlying condition that would make them susceptible? And maybe that's what Alabama's doing. They're
Yeah.
saying, hey, are you staying with grandma right now? Even though they're going to move to campus, maybe they're like, hey, we're going to let you stay for an extra 2 weeks and we're going to bring in 50 guys that don't have those issues or that extra sort of concern. We don't know, but it is it's interesting, and hopefully it goes well. And you know, in the next 30 days, we can kind of see that everybody's just back on campus and we're rolling like normal.
Absolutely. There's going to have to be a lot of preventive measures for this whole situation, and I feel Alabama, the state of Alabama, because that's where we're located right now. The state of Alabama has their measures in place, just like Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, so on and so forth. I think this is going to be, adhere to your state's guidelines first, then not so much the NCAA's guidelines, but the biggest thing is this whole social distancing and everything like that. They're going to have to be very careful on, being in large groups, I believe, but really adhering to those state guidelines, I think, is going to be what really factors into each team's workout and ability to get back to a sense of normalcy.
So to kind of transition out of that, we really need to think of a name for our segments. But I know that y'all like to get to your rooting interest at least once every week. Why don't we talk about the older news sort of first? I think it was about 10 days ago, maybe a little bit further back, that we found out to his brother, whose name I never learned how to say properly. It's either Taulia or Taulia, I think. um, is going to transfer to Maryland. What do y'all think about that? Were y'all surprised that he's sort of leaving, and were you surprised that he ended up in Maryland?
I was unsurprised he was leaving, and I wasn't very surprised he went to Maryland. It was one of the like 3 or 4 schools I thought he'd go to. I mean, my first pick for him would be Miami, and that was just because of rumors that he'd go wherever Tua went.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, going where Loxley was, that wasn't a surprise to me. I mean, I thought last year Jalen might go to Maryland. Before the Oklahoma news. So no, I wasn't really surprised. I think it'll be a good fit for him. I don't think there's going to be a hard fought competition for him to have to win there, so he'll get a good chance to probably show his worth.
Listening to Galu, I think that's how you say his father's name. Listen to Galu, he said, I think he was talking either 24/7 or Saturday Down South, but he was saying something of the sort that his son is a competitor, and to be a competitor, he's got to have that opportunity. So it was no animosity towards the University of Alabama, but I just feel like if Talia would have had another year here at the University of Alabama, I think he may have won the starting job. We'll never know, but I feel like Maryland will be a decent fit for him. Kind of caught me by surprise. I thought he would have went to Miami, where his brother is playing for the Dolphins down there. So I mean, it's kind of a interesting move, I guess, to say the least. But Maryland, they have a decent team in the Big Ten, I believe. So he'll have a little bit of success. He's going to force play against some top-notch teams like Ohio State and Michigan. So we'll see how he fares. But this is just really an interesting move from a strategy standpoint, I believe.
I mean, Maryland makes a decent bit of sense considering the family's relationship with Loxley. But for me, I do wonder if this is gonna be one of those situations that, doesn't make Alabama look bad, but I think he's going to play well enough at Maryland that at least some fans are going to go, how come he didn't look like that at Bama, or how come he didn't get more of a shot? And not that I think Mac, as we've already said, I think Mac Jones is going to do well next year. I think Bryce Young looks like he could be a great future quarterback. That maybe next year, or the year after. But I mean, I don't know. For me, watching, Taulia, um, in the 8A game, you know, uh, our first time sort of seeing him in action, two throws stand out to me. He made this terrible decision to throw into, I think, triple coverage, and he got picked off early in the game. And that seemed a lot like a throw Tua uh, had made previously, when he tries to force some of his stuff, which is really the only thing I feel like you can criticize Tua for. But then at the end of the game, I think he's scrambling to his left, and he throws across his body for a touchdown in just like the tightest window. And for me, that just those two throws, he just reminded me so much of his brother. The good and the bad that you get with Tua is just the you know he had the same sort of mentality. I'm gonna go for it even if it's a hard throw. And like Tua, sometimes you get picked off, and it's a terrible decision, and other times it makes people's jaws drop a little bit. And so I just wonder, you know if he makes enough of those throws at Maryland, do you think people will kind of be wondering, gosh, how did Alabama let him get away? I don't know if y'all feel that way though
Well,
about it.
I see what you're saying. I mean, I agree with you. I think he's going to look pretty good going towards that RPO scheme that Loxley does. I think that's a good fit for him. I mean, that's what Tua did his first year under Loxley. And maybe some of the stuff we moved on to with Sarkisian was a little too complicated. I mean, it was just an 8A game. That's all we really saw of him, and some mop-up duty. So maybe they tried to put him in some challenging situations. But I do think against the typical competition Maryland's going to face, running Loxley's RPO offense, as long as he's got some good weapons, I think he'll look really good up there.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he's got the opportunity to look great at Maryland, but I don't think that'll be necessarily a stain on Alabama, just because, in my opinion, you've got a level of competition in Alabama that you don't have other places. Or really, I'll just say you have a level in the competition in the SEC that you don't usually have other places. So, I mean, what you take a team like Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, who have like two or three good quarterbacks that come in every season, like freshmen behind or freshmen or sophomores that are behind the starting guy. You got to jock for position at that point to really make your names you kind of really get that second backup spot. And if you don't really get that backup spot behind the leader at that point, and then just say the quarterback goes down, then that second guy, that second string guy, has to go take in the quarterback spot. I mean, if you haven't had the reps and you really don't know, if you're really not confident in yourself, you can't really step out there and do that. So, just in my opinion, I think that he's going to do well at Maryland. I just don't see him. I just don't see that downing the University of Alabama's program, just because you just have way too many guys coming in year after year, vying for that quarterback spot, and it's just the best man. It's just the best man who gets it.
Yeah, absolutely. Then just to get to the more recent news with the Crimson Tide, did y'all see that Alabama announced a new home and home?
Yeah,
Yes,
Arizona.
absolutely. Arizona, Kevin Sumlin's team.
Yeah, 2032 and 2033. So, just 12 years away from seeing Alabama and Arizona face
Can't
off
wait.
in Bryant Denny.
Can't wait.
Won't be an old man at that point.
I
Well,
do kind of
Keshawn,
wish it was Arizona State. I like Tempe. Tempe's a cool town.
so um to get back, Keshawn, you're like 2 years away from being an old man, so I don't know that I don't know that it mattered when Alabama scheduled this game.
I'll be honest with you. My back hurts, my knees hurt, everything on me hurts. Yeah, but I'm very close. I'm only 25-year-old going on 50.
So what what do y'all we talked a little bit about it I think last week, but overall with the home and home format and Alabama's starting to schedule two of these a year with one home, one being on the road. Do y'all like the scheduling format? I think it's a lot more exciting than just the one neutral site game you get every year.
Yeah, I prefer two, but at the same time, I liked some neutral site. Like I wouldn't mind if it was one neutral site and then a home and home. I definitely like it better than playing FAU and Fresno State. That bullshit. But yeah, I like going to places like Dallas, Atlanta, and going to these NFL stadiums and watching the Tide play.
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of call out a few of the opponents Alabama's got in the next coming years, I mean, you got Wisconsin, West Virginia, Notre Dame, and Virginia Tech, and I mean, between those teams right there, I think they're going to provide some really stiff competition early on for the Tide. If those teams actually stay, like if the programs actually stay up as they are in the top 10, top 25, I think that there will probably be a lot of conversation on saying is Alabama got a really good measuring stick for a good team this year.
So just to go through for some of our listeners, just to go through sort of the home and homes that Alabama has coming up, and I believe this is in order. Texas, beginning in 2022 and 2023. I'm not going to do all the years, but all of these are in back-to-back years. So you got Texas, then you have Wisconsin, then Florida State, West Virginia, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Oklahoma, Virginia Tech, and then the Arizona is going to slide in between the Oklahoma and Virginia Tech series, I believe. Um, you know, what what do y'all think of that? Is there one that sort of stands out on your list? Is that you're surprised by or most excited by?
Probably most excited for Texas. Austin's a really cool town. Uh, Going to see what their tradition comprises of because I know there's another blue blood. That one and the Oklahoma one are probably the two big. Well, no,
Notre Dame is a classic.
they're a
One that
blue
really
blood, even though they suck.
they are. It's a classic showdown. I will say the one for me that really stands out is Wisconsin. I've actually been to Camp Randall on a couple of occasions and seen some games there. And the tradition there is really kind of rivals a little bit of the SEC. But I think that game, that home and home series for Alabama is going to be interesting just because being so far away from home, and then having to really play a team like Wisconsin, who's really kind of been on the come up the last few years. So I believe that's kind of got my interest a little bit. West Virginia, uh, I can't say right now. The West Virginia right now is going to really be a great game, but I still think it will be I still think it will be a good game just because they're a good team, and if they can actually get themselves up, get the program back into shape in a couple of years, I believe they'll be contending for a national championship pretty soon. So if Alabama gets to them in 2027, they're up. It should be a really good game.
So, Keshawn, do you think Saban's going to be there for the West Virginia home and home in 2026 and 2027?
He'd better be.
Oh man, that debate. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I have a reasoning behind that, but I do. The reasoning behind that to me is this: there's an old saying that say you don't take an old man off a tractor, because at the end of the day he's gonna go crazy. So I mean, Saban, he's about 69 years old. He's I'll put it this way: Saban can do whatever he wants for the rest of his season, for the rest of his coaching career. He solidified himself as a Hall of Famer, all-time greatest college football coach. Of at least this era. I'll say this era.
Oh, you're
So I mean,
about to anger the ghost of Bear Bryant.
of this era. So I mean,
Better than Bear
I
Bryant.
will say, I will say, I am. I believe Coach Saban will keep coaching for a little while longer. Who's to say when that day will be when he just hangs it up? But I could see him coaching for at least another 10 years.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't see him hanging it up ever, unless he has said once that if he feels like his age or something is affecting his ability to coach and he can't coach effectively, then he'll step away. But I don't see that happening unless he gets some disease or something. Which please hope. But as long as he stays healthy, I don't see him ever stepping down from that. Cause he's just, I don't know if he can live without being a part of a team.
Plus, I mean, he's always wanted to play or coach at Virginia Tech. So he definitely can't leave before that home and home in 2034 and 2035.
He's gonna be there, of course.
I think he could. I think if at the very worst, it would be like a Joe Paterno situation where he's in the booth calling the plays and somebody else is on the field, maybe orchestrating everything, but he's in the booth calling the plays at the very worst. So I mean,
I didn't know where we were going with that when we started.
I know
I
I
was
scared a lot of people for.
I was I was a little concerned we were gonna have to cut the podcast right here.
But no, I could see him being in a booth or, kind of coaching in the booth standpoint, if he's not physically on the field.
Okay, let's end here with just some quick questions rounding where we stand. Um, what would y'all say is the least exciting uh away game you'd want to attend? So out of all of those, you have the game sort of listed in front of you. Keshawn, what's the away game you're least excited to go to?
Well, man, there's one in particular, and I'm gonna say Southern Florida, just because I'm not really high on them, and I mean they really don't pose a threat. So
I
yeah,
completely forgot. Yeah, um,
Yeah, we didn't include them on our home and home
South
list, but
Florida.
that
I
is,
didn't include them on the roundup. Okay, so let's. Would we also? I feel like we would
we
all.
would all say
It's not a
that.
Power Five game, so no disrespect to them, but out
Uh,
of the Power Five
let's go with full
opponents,
disrespect. I'm okay with it.
out
fair
of the
enough.
Power Five opponents, Keyshawn, what stands out to you? What's the away game you'd least like to attend? It can be because of competition, venue,
This may be
how
the
long it
same for
takes you
all
to
of
get
us
you
too.
there. No,
Um,
I do think this is going to be different.
well, I want to say West Virginia just because I don't know
Oh,
what West Virginia team's going to be. But I will say it interests me, but I also will say I would not want to go attend West Virginia.
Okay,
West Virginia.
so that's a combination of not as big a history, and you don't want to go all the way to West Virginia.
True.
Okay, that's fair. Leo, I think we're all going to be different. What do you think, Leo?
hard Georgia Tech, very hard
That's
Georgia Tech. Their stadium is a dump. Their team is a dump. Atlanta is a dump. No, I mean, I like going to the Mercedes Dome, but
we just lost our 2 listeners in Atlanta.
well, I mean, when I was visiting for colleges, we looked at Georgia Tech and we stayed we parked in a parking garage or close to campus to go tour it. We came back to find all our belongings robbed from our car in this parking garage with cameras around. It didn't matter. They decided they wanted to rob us. So
Welcome to Atlanta.
yeah, that area has always been a dump to me. But also no,
Okay.
the stadium is not lightest.
Yeah, I expected you to say Georgia Tech. So I'm actually I'm gonna go Virginia Tech for similar reasons to
But Inner
sort of.
Sandman.
Okay, so I can hear Inner Sandman in other places. I'm sure it's cool. I'm sure it would. It's not as much the experience there. It's for me competitively Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech. stand out as two of the weaker opponents. The game's most likely to be least competitive. And Georgia Tech, I can get to in a couple hours. Virginia Tech is going to be a haul to get there. So I don't want to haul up there just to see what is probably going to be a blowout. I mean, all of these games are interesting to some degree, and we might go to all of them if we could.
Yeah,
But
I probably will.
yeah,
He's
but
throwing them down.
if we have to single one out that we're least excited for, going up to Virginia Tech, that far away, that far into the future, yeah, that's the least exciting to me. Opposite question, Keshawn, if you could only go to one of these. So we talked a little bit about some that stand out that are exciting, but if you could only go to one of these away games and you had to skip all the rest, what would you say?
Oh wow. Uh, I'm kind of tied at two. But the only one, if I can only go to one, I think I would want to go to Texas, just because Leo mentioned this earlier in the podcast, the history. Texas has always been especially Austin is Austin's a great city. And I've been out there a couple times, and really and truly, Texas. I mean, you got a lot of good, rich history at that school. It's a Big 12 school, and you just really have a lot of. They provide a good opponent for Alabama, so I feel like, you know, it would be interesting. It would be one of the better games I could say I've ever went to if I had to go out to Austin for that.
Leo, would you stick with Texas?
No, so that's probably my favorite one of them. But if I could only choose one, and this may not make much sense, I would choose Notre Dame.
Mhm.
But more of my reasoning for that is my desire to go to Texas would just be for Austin, but I'm sure I'll have plenty of other opportunities or reasons to go to Austin. Notre Dame would just be a cool atmosphere to see. I mean, like it or not, they're a blue blood. They've got a lot of tradition. And maybe it's just because they had that TV deal before any other team did, but that's neither here nor there. I think it would be interesting to see all those Golden Domes come out and play up in South Bend. Cool.
Yeah, so for me, I think the most exciting game from a competitive standpoint is probably Oklahoma. But if I can only go to one of these, I would also pick Notre Dame. And maybe it won't live up, but just the hype around the experience in South Bend. You hear a lot about it even down here. I can say that you know, a couple years ago, my parents were passing through and they stopped and they toured the campus and they took pictures of the stadium and everything. And you know, it does stand out. As if you're going to list, 10, 15 teams and locations for college football, Notre Dame's probably going to work its way into that list or be pretty close. And one thing you can normally count on with Notre Dame is even in a down year, Notre Dame is normally a 7 or 8 win team. So it's unlikely that the Irish just completely bottom out. And for me, that's almost that's probably half of it is, I want to see a competitive game in person. And I want to see a cool atmosphere that I'm not going to get the chance to go to again. Like you said, I've been to Austin before, so I would pick Notre Dame as well. Okay, I think that's a good spot to wrap up. Keshawn, why don't you bring us home?
Thank you for listening to the Snap, Tackle, and Flop college football podcast. Be tuning in each week as we go through our different takes on the SEC and from our different takes on the SEC all the way to the Pac-12. Be sure to wash your hands, stay safe through this whole COVID mess, and pay attention to your state and local guidelines. God bless.